Gothic doesn't mean dark, although it can, but it means counterculture. It means oppositional, like to whatever's mainstream at the time. And that's really its utility, and it's something that we find very attractive and almost necessary.
Christine Laskowski is a video journalist and the host of the podcast T&J, a limited series about 6th century Byzantium and the great love story between Empress Theodora and her husband, the Emperor Justinian. For this episode, however, Christine is going to share with us her research from a sidebar episode she called Gothic as a Modifier. We'll see how a lone barbarian people came to represent everything from the Notre Dame cathedral and Flannery O'Connor's writing to the band Joy Division and the edgy hot topic fashion that marked the 90s and early 2000s and then bloomed into a full-blown moral panic. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. I am so excited to welcome a very different kind of guest that's going to give us a different kind of history than we usually get on this show. So welcome, Christine.
Hi, Chelsey and American Hysteria fans. It is a true delight to be here.
Oh, well, I would love if you started by just introducing yourself and the work that you do, especially with the podcast that will kind of shed some light on the topic today.
Sure. My name is Christine Laskowski. I am a video journalist by profession, but my podcast is a passion project that came about really during COVID. I just moved to Berlin, lockdown happened, and because I'm a nerd and I just, as one does sometimes, you just store random knowledge, and I knew that the very first pandemic had occurred in the 500s. And I thought, why don't I just order some books, read about this period?
Yes.
And then when I came out of lockdown, this was all I could talk about. And then friends of mine in Berlin were like, maybe you should make a podcast.
Maybe you should take all these things you're saying to us and put them over here.
Precisely.
Yes, I've had that said to me.
You know
Yes.
a thing or two about that. So that's where T&J, a Roman Empire love story, came from. T&J stands for Theodora and Justinian. Not to get too much into the weeds here, but it's about the relationship between this empress and emperor during early to mid 500s AD. And part of the journey of learning about this era of the Roman Empire was learning about the barbarians and the many, many barbarians, yes. Right? There is no Rome without the counterpoint that the barbarians, you also have the Persian Empire, but they're not really considered barbarians. They were an equal on par empire. So we're putting them to the side. Okay. I'm talking about barbarians, namely in Europe and the Central Asian steppe. But in this period of history, the ones that really, I think, shine the most and that I grew to love were the Goths. And so we will get into the Goths as ancient barbarian people in a second. But what I wanted to point out is that I think, there's a place we can start amidst the American hysteria of it all that I think you are quite familiar with, and that would be the Satanic Panic.
Yes. And I would say as well, the panic that came around the trenchcoat mafia after Columbine as well. And I think those are all kind of folded together. So I am so ready to start here now, close to now, in a recent history where many of us were actually alive. And then
the 90s.
The 90s. Remember that? 90s kids know.
I do remember the 90s. I am an elder millennial. So
me too.
Not too hard. Okay. Satanic Panic. I can do a bit of a refresher unless you want to give folks a bit of a refresher about the Satanic Panic.
Yeah, I want to hear your synopsis because I'm interested in what you're pulling out of the Satanic Panic in your context, right?
Perfect. So I'm just going to summarize the Satanic Panic as a period mainly in the United States, lasting from the early 1980s to the mid 1990s, and, kind of characterized by this series of what we could consider modern day witch trials, right? Like, sort of emboldened by the rise of the new right, this Reagan Christian moral majority conservative situation. And it began with the persecution of a bunch of daycare operators. And then basically it really started to grow in the mainstream by the mid 1990s, sort of culminating in the West Memphis 3 trial, which I believe you're familiar with.
Definitely.
I grew up in Memphis, so I was a kid at this time. Now, West Memphis is in Arkansas. I'm not going to get into it. Talk about it's on the other side of the Mississippi River.
Sure.
So the connection between people living in Memphis and people in West Memphis is not that great. But as a child, I just remember growing up very much in the buckle of the Bible Belt and this just being top of mind. I really remember this as a news story as a kid.
So it was like you were seeing it in the press all the time.
All the time. And adults were talking about it all the time. And it was a very conservative Christian environment. And so talking about Satanism and satanic ritual was talked about like it was fact.
Oh, yeah.
And so in preparation for our conversation, I thought, okay, let me look back and find an article from the Memphis newspaper of record, the Commercial Appeal, and just to find some language about how it was characterized. Because I wasn't reading newspapers. I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, so this Commercial Appeal article was published in 1994, February 27th, and it is just a few weeks shy of the trial of Damien Echols. So he is, one of 3 defendants that were being tried for the murder of 3 8-year-old boys. And he is identified as the primary culprit or the instigator, the ringleader, as it were. So this is before his trial is set. Someone else is part of his cohort, Jesse Miskelly. So he'd already been tried and convicted, sentenced to life imprisonment. And these are, young guys,
teenagers.
Yeah, new adults. Damien Echols is 18.
18, yeah.
So here's the opening of this article dated from 1994 in the Memphis Commercial Appeal. The legend of Damien Echols blows through the trailer parks and flatlands around this Delta town like a brisk winter wind, chilling listeners with tales of vampires, Satanism, and ritual murder. Rumors have run wild since police found the nude bodies of 3 8-year-old West Memphis boys last May in a water-filled ditch. From the start, authorities received tips the murders were occult killings. Echols, a quiet teenager who often wore a black trench coat and talked about worshiping the devil, became a prime suspect within days. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That was even more fantastical than I expected it to be.
Yes.
So yeah, you were in this. You were
insane.
This.
This was all in the ether at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
People believed it, bought it. No one was really questioning the framing or the tone or anything like that.
A cult in every woods, really. Yeah.
What I want to point out is the black trench coat, which you've already pointed out, right? And Damien Echols grew up in a trailer park. The article, presents him as this, trailer trash kid. They also point out that he'd changed his name, even though there appear to be clearly rational reasons for the name change. The fact that he goes from Michael Wayne Hutchison to Damien Echols, choosing Damien.
Yeah, of course.
Classmates are oh, he chose it from the Omen movies. And then you ask his family and they're well, he was considering converting to Catholicism and named himself after a Catholic missionary priest or whatever, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. They also note how before this all happens, he goes to Oregon. So it's he goes to Oregon, catches some witchy behavior over in Oregon, leaves the South, God forbid.
I'm in Salem, Oregon right now, which feels, even though it's the wrong Salem.
Are you just breathing in the witchy air?
Yeah.
Be careful.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and, there are people that say, oh, Eccles told some teens a satanic priestess had followed him from Oregon to murder him or pull him back into a cult. He testifies at his trial that he practiced Wicca. But, I think at its core here, and you hear it in the article, is that while Damien Eccles was on trial, a large part of the prosecution's case against him was based on his, quote, Gothic clothing, right?
Yes.
The black trench coat, his black hair, which was his natural hair color, by the way. These physical attributes were really easy for the conservative Christian norm at that time to point at and say, he's other, he's different, he's not a part of the community.
Yeah. Ties
to Satanism was not that far of a leap.
Yeah.
And that was basically what he was convicted for. And he was sentenced to death. Like he got the death penalty.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So he gets the death penalty. Fortunately, he had his case dismissed. So he's a free man, I believe, living in Salem, Massachusetts was like the last
which is great
location I was able to find for him, living his best life.
Yeah, he's home. Yeah.
Yeah, he's home. I think he has like a Reiki practice. Like,
oh, great.
Go Damien.
Get it. I know. He's wonderful too. If you haven't read his books, he is a lovely, wonderful person. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't read it either. I mean, this reminds me of all the books connected to Goths and the Gothic that I'm considering after this a book club. But yeah, so
yeah. I love that.
So that'll be on it. But yeah, starting point, Satanic Panic, Damien Eccles essentially being on trial for being a goth kid.
Well, and also I think that it's interesting because I feel like goth really starts to come into the vernacular because we also have like Johnny Depp, we'll just put him out there, opinions aside. He was working really hard to get them out of prison. And, there were a lot of celebrities. There was a Peter Jackson documentary. Like this was really thrusting the goth, personality, the look, the identity into the public eye in a way that involved like celebrities standing up for goths, which is also so fun, right? It was like, it wasn't a fun situation, but it was cool to see, people be like, well, I was different. I dressed different. People accused me of, looking too dark or deviating too much from the norm. And so I want to go and, help these boys that I see my own gothic self in.
Absolutely. It is not against the law to wear all black and to be weird. There's no law,
as much as
at least
like it
not
to be.
yet, as much as they'd like it to be, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll get to Johnny Depp because he comes back a little later. We're gonna take a journey that's a little bit of a loop.
All right, Depp.
Yeah,
sounds good. All right, take it away. Let's hear it.
Okay, so here's how we're gonna start with my podcast. As I mentioned at the top, learning so much as I did about barbarians and the Goths as a group of barbarians, I kept thinking, wow, the Goths or the Gothic as an adjective to describe somebody or something today means so many different things. And none of them seem directly tied to this barbarian group that I can think of, right? It's not like they were wearing all black. It's not, like they were like especially moody or decorating their houses with gargoyles or, and I had never seen this connection made anywhere, right? So how do we get from this being the name of an antique barbarian people to, and we can name some of them. There's Gothic architecture, there's Southern Gothic, American Gothic, goth music, mall goths.
Yeah. I love a mall goth.
Right? It means so much. Yeah. So part of what I wanted to do in this one sort of explanatory long essay in my podcast called Gothic as a Modifier was to just follow the path. How did we get from there to here?
I am so excited.
This is where the journey starts.
Okay, Professor, take it away. I'm so excited.
Chelsey.
Gothic Professor.
Yeah, Professor Goth. Chelsey, do you know anything about the Goths as a barbarian people? Anything at all that you can summon?
Frickin' nothing.
Okay, no problem.
Nada. So you put us in time. Where are we at?
Okay, so the time that I'm focusing on is the 400s to 500s AD. Clearly, the Goths entered the scene before then. I don't have a ton of expertise on that. However, what I do want to say is the Goths originated, we believe, around the northern Black Sea region. So we're talking modern day Ukraine and Bulgaria, and they settled along the Danube River. And the Danube River in antiquity, in Roman antiquity at least, was a very important natural barrier, right? So you had a lot of barbarians on the other side, and often they would come to settle, and sometimes in the winter, it would get very cold and the Danube River would freeze over, and then the barbarians would come and make their move, right?
And skate on the river.
Skate across. Oh my God, yes.
Wish she had a river to skate away on. That could be a little emo, I guess. Anyway.
Oh, love it. When this is a musical, we'll have them. Yeah, we'll have that be. Oh, yes. Yeah. TNJ on Ice will be Gothics crossing the Danube.
Oh, perfect. You'll tour the country, and some people will go.
Yeah. Okay, so that's their origin. There's some speculation by some that they came from Scandinavia. That's really unfounded. Mostly North Black Sea region. They come settle along the Danube. And this is a point where I will introduce a distinction.
Okay.
There are the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths. I don't know if you've heard these terms before.
No.
But basically, the Ostrogoths, Ostro meaning east, they're the East Goths, and the Visigoths are the West Goths. So the Ostrogoths are pretty much the ones we're concerned with. The Visigoths go settle kind of in France, eventually Spain. We're not really so worried about them. The ones that we really care about are the Ostrogoths, because they come and settle in Italy. And they settle in Italy, the peninsula, the Italian peninsula, late 400s AD. They'd already sacked Rome a couple of times, but then they were finally given the Italian peninsula as a gift. At this point, the Roman Empire is more or less centered its capital in Constantinople, which is today Istanbul. And by that point, the empire was not quite so active in Italy. And essentially, they'd given Italy to the Ostrogothic king, who I'll just call Gothic king from this point on. The Gothic king Theodoric. So he is their leader. He accepts Italy as a gift because it had come under the rule of this rowdy, unreliable Roman warlord. And so the emperor in Constantinople was like, listen, Theodoric, if you come and handle this guy, you can rule Italy. And he does, and they take it, and they're like really good at ruling it.
Wow, they're good at ruling it.
They're good at ruling it. You know, the Roman senators, they don't mind. They get to keep their lands and all of their enslaved people and so forth. Oh, one thing I wanted to add about the Gothic rule in Italy under King Theodoric is that, you know, religious tolerance. So Catholics were cool. They were good with Jews. Even when the Romans tried to come and reclaim Italy, the Jewish people, you know, there's the history of Jewish leadership being like, no, you know, like it's so much better under the Goths. Thank you very much. Which I think is an important thing to note.
Yeah.
And the last thing I'll note is that there was one barbarian group at the time. And again, we're still talking about, you know, 400s to mid 500s AD. In my podcast, I call it the TNJ era, 450 to 570. But at this time, there's one barbarian group. They convert when they convert to Christianity. They convert to Catholicism. The Franks are one of, I guess I couldn't say the lone barbarian peoples, but really one of the few, and certainly the most prominent, that when they converted to Christianity, they converted to Catholicism.
Okay.
And that is important because of our next sort of Gothic leap here.
Okay.
If you want to think of a giant Gothic structure in France, where does your mind go?
Notre Dame?
Exactly, right? So now we're in France, and we're going to talk about Gothic architecture, which was not always called Gothic. Okay. Surprise. Okay, so the first person credited with designing a Gothic structure is a man named Suger in 1144 AD. So, you know, we're a couple centuries out from Goths in Italy and the Franks and etc. So what's important to know about Suger is he was an abbot of a church located just a little bit north of Paris called Saint Denis. And basically, he's made an abbot there because he was a poor boy that lucked out in getting a very good education in which one of his classmates that he befriends ends up being King Louis. So once Louis is made king of France, there's his buddy Suger, smart, becomes his advisor, and then Louis makes him the abbot of Saint Denis.
Nice.
And so Suger decides he wants to enact this sort of dream he has of building structures that are in pursuit of light. So what's interesting about the origins of Gothic architecture is we tend to think of it as something really dark, right? It's a little, almost has a little, it's a little bit of ominous to it almost.
Oh, yeah.
But really his philosophy behind it was, he wanted structures that, were thin and with lots of stained glass that would let light in, right? So they were high and airy, and everything was about the pursuit of light, which ran contrary to the Byzantine style, right? So if you think about the Hagia Sophia, which was the sort of standout Christian basilica of the time, very different sort of philosophy. We're talking domes and very thick walls, etc. And so my understanding with Suger and with Saint Denis, to go back to 1144 AD at this moment in time in France, is it's not, I believe, like this massive, massive structure. Saint Denis is not the equivalent of Notre Dame. It's sort of his own playground to play around with some of these concepts and ideas. And so what are some of those concepts and ideas? Pointed arches, ribbed vaults, again, an excessive amount of stained glass. So not a little bit here and there, but, stained glass that almost takes up entire walls, a rose window. That was something that he's credited with designing. So, you're talking about these like circular windows with almost petal-like ovals around them that sort of create this rose look. So those are things that this abbot Suger initially did, but he did not finish this and cross his arms and look up at it and say, oh yes, I have designed the first Gothic structure. That did not come until later. For a long time, Suger's style at Saint Denis was called the French style because people liked it. It took off primarily in France. So it got the name the French style. But then, and I think this is really funny, because my brother lives in Italy and Italians love to rag on the French. So it feels really fitting that a Renaissance Italian man comes along. And so this Renaissance Italian philosopher comes along in the 1530s, and he alters the course of history by insulting the Goths and the French in one go. So,
whoa.
Yes.
Cool.
So this man is named Giorgio Vasari. And, I feel like when you talk to Italians, they've studied him and they know who he is. I'd never heard about him before until I researched this podcast. Very important Renaissance thinker and intellectual, and he writes a lot. So I'm just going to quote the one line that we care about.
Okay.
And the line that we care about is, "Then arose new architects who, after the manner of their barbarous nations, erected buildings in that style which we call Gothic."
Yeah. Yeah. More after this. And now back to the show.
So he's the first one. He's the first one to call this French style Gothic. This whole in that style, which we call, no one seems to, we don't know who this we is because no one called it that yet.
Yes.
But something about it takes off. So the French style goes to the Gothic style, even though the Goths never lived in France. They lived in Italy, or some of them did, but the ones he's referring to, they primarily lived in Italy. He would have been familiar with them and their history. But I guess what he's just trying to do is to say, this French style is barbaric. It's not this neoclassical style that we are valuing here in the Renaissance. And so since it's barbaric and it's not classical, i.e. Roman, I'm going to call it Gothic.
Okay. All right.
And it stuck.
It's a really good word, It's
such a good word.
It's just a word that would stick around. I like saying it. It's a very cool word. And it seems like it was cool then as well.
It was cool then. But what's fascinating is how It's almost like that fucking feather in the Forrest Gump intro or something, like it just floats and then you think it's going to land and then it kind of gets another gust of air and then it's back at it. But I think
beautiful metaphor.
It just has so much utility is the thing. And I think at its root, the Goths were counterculture. If you think about Rome as being the mainstream, they were counterculture.
As counterculture as you could be in that context, I guess, right?
About as counterculture as you could be in that context. And okay, so we're following the feather.
All right. Next gust.
And where it picks up again, because you've heard of Gothic fiction. Okay. Have you ever heard of a book called The Castle of Otranto?
Yes, but I don't know anything about it.
Tell me more.
I don't know. No, I'm just like, it's just in the ether and I've picked it up at some point, but I don't know anything. So, Professor.
Okay, but you have heard of The Castle of Otranto. Yes. Okay. The Castle of Otranto is a very, very important book in the story of the word goth and Gothic, because it is the very first Gothic novel. It is overwhelmingly perceived as the very first Gothic novel. I do not make these decisions. That seems to be the consensus.
Did you say what year we're in right now?
Oh, great question. We are in the year 1764, late 1764, because The Castle of Otranto is published in England on Christmas Eve in 1764.
Okay.
And this is so interesting to me. The Castle of Otranto has two editions. The first edition is authored by a man named William Marshall, gentleman.
No way. Okay. All right.
So authored by William Marshall, gentleman, which is how I'll always refer to him. Just William, Yeah. I am Christine Laskowski, lady.
Famously.
Henceforth. So basically, William Marshall, gentleman, in the book's preface is like, I have made this remarkable discovery, and that is this book. It was originally written by a man named Onufrio Moralto at this church in Otranto, Italy, and he himself was recounting a tale. And that is this tale that goes back to the Crusades. And I happen to find it and I'm publishing it in its entirety for you, my lovely English audience. Okay, so that's The Castle of Otranto. Less than a year later, there's a second edition of The Castle of Otranto. And the author has changed.
Oh, okay.
Also, there's a new subtitle. Any guesses what the subtitle is?
I don't know. Is it like 100 years long?
It's a Gothic story.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't there before. It wasn't in the first edition, but the second edition of The Castle of Otranto, a Gothic story.
Cool.
Woohoo.
Cool.
And the new author is a man by the name of Horace Walpole.
Okay. Not gentleman.
Not, I mean, but he is a gentleman. Okay. He is a lord. And in fact, not just a lord, he is a longstanding member of parliament.
Ooh.
And the son of basically Britain's first ever prime minister, Robert Walpole, or Sir Robert Walpole. So he is like upper echelon of society here.
Okay.
But he was also, very importantly, a Gothic architecture obsessive.
Ooh, okay.
Spent a lot of time in Italy, even though there's not a ton of Gothic architecture in Italy per se. And I'll get into it. But I guess what I should say is that Horace Walpole, being a lord and being fabulously wealthy, has money to spend on converting his estate, which is called Strawberry Hill. And it still exists today. It's in London. Ooh. You can go see it. I have not been. I would love to go check it out. I've basically just been, hot on their Instagram feed. The pictures are amazing. But like Strawberry Hill was converted into essentially Horace Walpole's idea of a Gothic wonderland.
Cool. Gothic wonderland is something. I don't know what it should be.
It's a Gothic wonderland.
Maybe a theme park.
I describe it in the podcast as like Sir Lancelot's wet dream. It's like white with spires and crenellated towers and
very good.
It's really cool looking and very, very out of step for the time. But it kind of has this effect where it kicks off this Georgian Gothic revival movement in England. So he kind of goes out on a limb, redesigns his estate in the way he wants to with this Gothic aesthetic, and then kicks off this new Gothic revival movement in Italy and revives it as a popular architectural style.
Wow.
What's also cool about Walpole, and hard to say definitively, but he's also an LGBTQ icon. We don't know a ton about. We know he never married. There's letters between him and some close gay male friends. It's hard to say anything conclusive, but I think it's pretty fair to say also because the Strawberry Hill Museum estate, identifies Walpole as an LGBTQ icon. So I think it's safe to say that the Gothic is also queer.
Oh, come on. That is so true.
Maybe no surprise there, but it's official. It's official. People.
Stamp it.
It's official.
I love that.
Yeah, stamp it.
Are we going to go back to why the name on the book was switched?
We don't know. We actually don't know. We don't know why he put his own name on it, and we don't know why precisely a Gothic story subtitle appeared. But we can very clearly say that Strawberry Hill, his estate, is the inspiration for the fictional castle in the Castle of Otranto.
Okay.
And that is important because of the centrality of the castle as a character in the book.
I'm going to look at this castle.
Look up Strawberry Hill.
Strawberry Hill House. Wow. Cool.
You see it?
Wow. Yeah, it's really cool. Okay. Now I have the context in my mind. Thank you.
No problem. So the centrality of the castle is something that I believe, and this is not something that I've cooked up myself, but I think what's central to Gothic fiction, Gothic literature, is the centrality of a castle or a very large house, right? And this comes from the Castle of Otranto. And I'm not going to get too much into the plot of it, but, castles were this triumph over nature. And again, barbarians or, anything that was lawless, or the castle is supposed to keep you safe.
Right.
But what Walpole does in the Castle of Otranto is he inverts the castle, right? The dangers are inside. The castle itself is haunted.
The call is coming from inside the castle.
It's coming from inside the castle. And I'm not here to say, because I haven't read all of the books, that no one had come up with this concept or device before, but it really is most prominent here and takes off. And this becomes a hallmark of Gothic fiction and Gothic literature.
Cool. Okay.
And this is important because the term Gothic to describe a style of fiction wherein the call is coming from inside the house, as you so aptly put it, takes a little bit of time to gain traction. But would you want to venture any guesses as to who might have really seized on this concept? Who might have really been able to identify, like, oh, I've been invited to enter a castle and I'm choosing to of my own volition. But when I arrive, I discover that I've been lied to and I am sexual prey and I can't leave.
Beauty and the Beast?
No, but that's a great point, right? Women entered castles and were supposed to be safe, and then they weren't, right?
And they were very much not. But I knew that wasn't what you were talking about.
But the core of the idea is there. And so it's women writers that really take this idea of the Gothic and run with it. So, originally Horace Walpole, but then a few decades later, tons of women seize on this idea and really take Gothic literary fiction and this tradition to whole other levels, churning out fucking classics. I mean, we're talking Mary Shelley.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Frankenstein, Jane Austen, also in 1818 with Northanger Abbey. Like, Jane Austen isn't known to be a Gothic writer, but that was what was in vogue at the time. And so, that's what people were interested in. Totally. That's what she wrote. And then you have the Bronte sisters. They come along like about 30 years later with Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre. Again, these are all books that are oriented around women going to big fancy houses, learning that they'd been lied to, they're trapped, there are these secrets, etc. So again, centrality of the house, so forth. What's important, though, to note at this time is 1847. We are in a very specific period of history right now. Want to venture any guesses, Chelsey, as to what this period of history is? These are not trick questions. I feel like I'm putting you on the spot, but I just want to not just lecture.
No. I enjoy guessing. I mean, for me, when I think of the 1840s, I think about westward expansion and I think about like gold rush and things like that.
Totally.
But I don't know. I don't think that that's where you're going.
Like outside of America.
Oh, outside of America. I'm being so American. 1840s. I don't know.
It's all good. Your show. America is in the first day of a Bear show, so I think it's fair.
Oh, I know. I'm just such an American.
It comes back to America. Don't worry, because this was something that was very, what do I want to say? Very Western.
1840s. Tell me I'm going to slap my forehead like a cartoon.
No, it's fine. This is the Victorian era.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes, I knew that. I did know that.
Yeah, it's the Victorian era.
Of course.
And where does the Victorian era get its name?
Queen Victoria.
Exactly.
Yeah, there we go. I got one.
Queen Victoria is, how do I put it? I don't know what you know about Queen Victoria's sartorial legacy. I knew going into this research, because I'm a big articles of interest fan, there's an episode about Queen Victoria and what she did for the color white.
Oh.
Because Queen Victoria was not the first, but, chose to wear a white wedding dress, which wasn't conventional, but she conventionalized the white wedding dress. Yes.
What was the color before? Black?
No, it was anything. People just wore the nicest clothes that they owned at the time.
Yeah, makes sense.
And probably added like some squirts of pure perfume and, put on as many jewels as they could and called it a day.
Yeah. But she kind of was a trendsetter.
She was absolutely a trendsetter. And in more ways than one. And this really blew my mind because I thought, okay, it's enough to conventionalize the white wedding dress. But Queen Victoria conventionalized black for mourning.
Okay. Wow.
Yes. She was an itty bitty. She's like only 4'8". She's like an itty bitty badass goth queen.
Wow. Cool.
Yes.
Cool. And did she wear black just for mourning? Or was she integrating this more into a general wardrobe?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
All right.
So what happens, and I think one thing I want to take a little bit of time before I go into that, the Victorian era is a really long period of time just because Victoria lived and reigned for so long. So we're talking 1820 to 1914, like basically a century.
Yeah.
And so a lot happens in this century, not just corsets and wailing and imperialism and the Industrial Revolution, busy time, but also spiritualism.
Oh, yeah.
So that's also going on. So let's keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, always. We always keep spiritualism in mind here.
Yeah, it's a spooky, engaging with the spirits kind of time.
It's real good.
So back to your question, Victoria, she married, as they all do, a relative.
Keep it in the family.
But it was a real love match. His name was Albert. They were married for quite a while. I forget off the top of my head how many children they had, but considered him her soulmate. And then in 1861, Albert dies.
Oh, okay.
And Victoria is completely devastated. There's this great quote from her, my life as a happy one is ended.
Oh,
can't get more goth than that. It's so good.
Dude, I'm picturing Lydia Dietz from Beetlejuice. That's kind of what I'm seeing in my head right now.
Absolutely. And we'll get to Lydia. But yes, there's this thread. There's this linkage though, right? So what Victoria does is after Albert dies, she commits to wearing black every day for the remaining 40 years of her life.
Wow. Super gothic. Yeah.
Itty bitty goth queen.
Oh my gosh. Okay, really quick. Can you describe for us, if you know it, kind of what that outfit looked like?
I think she wore many different outfits because she was queen. So I think she's like switching up the black gowns. But because she's very small and also a bit, on the stout side, if you can imagine like the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland, but just in an all black gown, but like cinched in the waist as much as possible, that's what she wore, more or less.
Painting the roses black.
Painting the roses motherfucking black.
Yes.
Yes, she did.
Rock on.
But what's important to know about this, because the era is literally named after her. She is an icon, not just in the UK, but in the US. Again, peak of English imperialism. So, what she does, people notice. Yeah. And so, women they didn't just want to follow her wedding dress trend. They get really into mourning attire. And because we're in a period of time too that coincides with mass market textiles, the availability of ladies' magazines, people and women across all classes in the UK and the US, they can now afford to emulate her style. They have access to this style. Like, there's some examples, for instance, like department stores like Lord & Taylor even added mourning departments, right? Wow. Like, here's the mourning section. I'm not kidding.
Wow,
yeah. Fashion magazines would like advertise the latest, because we're talking lots of black crepe, prayer books, Bibles being bound in black leather. Note, bound black leather.
Are you hearing it?
Yeah. Are you hearing it? It's coalescing. That's the sound of coalescing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Okay. Question.
Sure. Of course.
The mourning department in the stores, are we borrowing from that for our regular rotation of clothing, or are we only getting those outfits for mourning specifically, right? Because it's like, are they emulating Queen Victoria's constant mourning where it's like we mourn every day? Or is it like I go to the mourning department when my husband dies and I need a cute little outfit for that?
No, that's a really astute observation. Yes and no, I would argue.
Okay.
You would go to the mourning department for the mourning clothes and all of the other mourning gear, let's say. But then there's also a process of phasing out of it. So you can go into half mourning. And I think there's like a year where you like wean yourself off of mourning. For lack of a better word. And you go to half mourning. They're different stages. I cannot tell you what they are exactly.
Right. Yeah.
But the point is that what Victoria does is, because she is the queen, she permits this expression of a whole range of emotions around unhappy feelings. So it's not just grief, but, I would argue disconsolation, alienation, woe, and it's all wrapped up in this attire. And it's not something that you have to wear for a limited amount of time. She's choosing to wear it for the rest of her life, which is 4 decades. So if the queen's doing it, you can do it. So you can basically choose to wear it for as long as you want, I think, is the example that she's setting. And I think that also does lend itself to this Gothic attire. I am choosing to express these feelings through this black clothing for as long as I want to.
Yeah, it's like a very emo mindset that she's popularizing. And I guess that's like cool in the fact that it's allowing, women especially to experience more emotions.
And widows.
Yeah.
And this comes up later, so keep the widows in mind. And
I always do.
I know, Chelsey. I know.
More after this. And now back to the show.
So we've got black leather, and maybe my first question to you would be, when I say goth music, what comes to mind?
Ooh, goth music. I mean, it's like I want to say Marilyn Manson, which is like first thought, best thought,
That is fair. No, that's fair. It's part of the continuum. Yeah.
What do you think of? Like, what's your if you first thought, best thought?
Well, I have been spoiled. Like, I know too much now. So it's hard for me to think about what I thought of goth before I did all of this research. I feel like I just, knew Susie and the Banshees.
Oh, sure. Yeah, if we were going for actual cool bands. Yeah.
Sorry, I should have been more explicit. Cool goth Chelsey.
Okay, all right. Susie and the Banshees. Great.
Yeah. Okay. So what is really fascinating about this journey is the first band to be called goth was, in fact, The Doors.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Didn't expect that.
So there is an article published in the United States in October of 1967, and it's written by a music critic named John Stickney.
Okay.
I just got to give him credit. He coined Gothic rock.
That's major.
I got to name him. Credit where credit is due. So he pens this article, and it's titled "Four Doors to the Future, Gothic Rock is Their Thing."
Cool.
And this is the first time that Gothic and rock are paired together.
Wow.
And as I like to say, step out on the red carpet of the cultural zeitgeist.
Wow. Beautiful. Again, a great metaphor to go with your Forrest Gump feather.
Right with my Forrest Gump feather. But what I really appreciate about this is that not only is Gothic rock alliterative and cool, so props to you, John Stickney, for that one, but also I think it's really appropriate, right?
Yeah,
and I can read some excerpts from the article, but if you think about someone like Jim Morrison, died too soon, R.I.P., but even in his short rock career life, was a very different kind of front man for his time, right? Again, we go back to this black leather, long curly hair, I like to say his own sort of gender fluid damselification, right?
Yeah.
That was very much his aesthetic. And, the way Stickney writes about his performances, again, these are all things that we're so used to now. It's just rock to be really raw and screaming and writhing and this. But it was very, very unconventional at the time. And the way he describes a performance, and I'll read some excerpts from it. Here's a line. "The Doors met in New York, for better or for worse, at a press conference in the gloomy, vaulted wine cellar of the Delmonico Hotel, the perfect room to honor the Gothic rock of the Doors."
Yes.
Isn't that nice?
Oh, that's nice.
Given everything we know so far, that's the sound.
Really nice.
Sound of coalescing. Yes.
Yes. It's coming together, baby.
It's coming together. So here's another line. "Jim Morrison gets all the attention, with black curls cascading over the upturned collar of a leather jacket worn the way leather jackets should be. Tight, tough, and somehow menacing."
Yes. Very hot.
It's so hot. And then here's the last one I'll read, because it's nice the way he talks about the end. So he writes about "Light My Fire," and then he goes, "The song deserves to be sung the Doors way, with suggestive intonation and instrumentation, striving together to produce the incredible erotic pressure of the driving orgasm scream climax."
Wow. Get this guy a friggin' Pulitzer. Wow.
I know.
Beautiful writing.
One more right after this.
Yeah.
"After all, sex is what hard rock is all about. But there is terror in the sexuality of The End, Morrison's black masterpiece of narrative poetry about a physical and spiritual odyssey, which finishes in patricide and incest."
Oh my God.
Morrison is at his best. He's still talking about The End. Morrison staggers blindly across the stage as the lyrics and the screams poured out of his mouth, malevolent, satanic, electric, and on fire.
Damn. That's the sound of coalescing. Wow. That is so, the drama. Okay. The drama is so good.
Right? So now the Doors are goth. Goth has a music and an aesthetic, and it's also satanic.
Yes.
All in this one article.
Wow. This is a really important article.
And it's not like you learn about it in the history books, but it takes on meaning in an art music critic milieu, so to speak,
Sure.
right? Because as this music starts to become popularized, the evolution of these different kinds of bands coming out of this post-punk scene, when you're a music critic, you read other music criticisms and you know what's come before and said about other bands. And so when you have bands, what are some examples? Like I said before, Susie and the Banshees. If you're familiar with goth music, you'll be familiar with bands like Magazine or Bauhaus, even someone like Klaus Nomi. I don't know if you're familiar with Klaus Nomi.
I am not at all. Okay. But I bet some of our listeners are like, Chelsey!
Look up Klaus Nomi.
Okay. All right.
But the point is that they embody this aesthetic, this schema, tight, black, pale makeup, this sort of extreme chiaroscuro in their aesthetic, and also the music that they're creating. How to describe it? Well, Gothic and rock is kind of right there for the taking. And even Joy Division's own manager, when they're on the BBC having an interview with the host, describes the music in his own words as Gothic.
Yeah.
And in the same sentence is using the term Gothic and justifies the term Gothic to describe Joy Division's music because it's different from the pop mainstream.
Ooh,
so again, utilized to indicate not mainstream.
A counterculture is forming.
Exactly. So we get to that in the 80s. That is where the Gothic music category comes in.
Okay.
But what's interesting about Jim Morrison time, which is the 60s, is that if you think about Jim Morrison and the sort of aesthetic he embodied, and also being, in the 60s, you had rock people, a lot of hippies, and hippies, I think it's important to note, and I wasn't aware of this until I did a lot of this research. I think we think about hippies wearing very specific types of clothes.
Sure.
But what I hadn't realized is that a lot of their clothes were Victorian.
Huh. Say more.
A lot of the reason for that is think about the cheapest clothes you can find.
Okay.
As in free. Like basically in short, it's grandma's closet.
Right.
I want to wear old stuff. I just go into grandma's closet. And what's in grandma's closet? A lot of Victorian shit.
Yeah.
And so we're talking a lot of paisley. We're talking about like big piratey blouses. So, when you see so they're basically just taking stuff from their grandparents' closets and, discarded stuff and like repurposing it. So that ends up becoming a big part of the sort of like 60s alternative attire.
And there was like a lot of thrift store stuff happening. I know that that was a big part of hippie culture that we don't talk about. So I feel like you're getting your grandma's clothes. Maybe you're doing a clothing swap, very college era.
But there are a lot of Victorian pieces.
Yeah, that would make sense. So they're everywhere. Okay.
Everywhere and really cheap at the time.
And good for them for recycling. Yeah.
Good for
it's
them.
The hippie way.
Those eco-friendly hippies in ways you wouldn't even expect. Okay, so that's important to note just as part of the sort of sartorial style of the 60s and what's sort of alts, because, when we talk about this next part, because we're still in the 60s, I'm just, how do I put this? What would you say is maybe the most iconic Gothic American family?
Addams Family?
Yes.
Yeah, I got one.
You got one.
I love the Addams Family. I mainly love the 90s movies because they're stunningly perfect, but I know there's a longer history of the cartoon.
Absolutely. And that factors into this. It all comes together. It's all. So the Addams Family debuts on ABC in 1964. So basically 3 years before this Doors article, the Addams Family debuts on ABC. And then a week later, like the Munsters premieres on CBS.
Oh, God, I love the Munsters.
So we have like 2 Goth families on primetime television in the 1960s, right? So we go from 0 TV Goth families to 2 TV Goth families. Even though we're not calling them Goth yet, I think what I want to point out at this juncture is that this Doors article comes out, not that it's making headwaves, but this is all part of the same zeitgeist, right? You have these 2, let's call them Goth families, on primetime television, pale skin, dark makeup, dramatic black clothes.
And like reveling in it too. Like it's like,
oh yeah,
that's their whole world and everyone else is kind of weird, but we're the like normal ones, which is so fun. Yeah. Okay.
And also the centrality of the house too is also quite Gothic as well, right? They live in like the haunted mansion and it's decrepit, but it's full of magic and, you know, what am I trying to say? Opulent, or at least it has an opulent history, right? We're not talking about people that are like low class. These are like
opulence crumbling.
Well-to-do. Yeah. And I feel like the class, is not something you want to ignore. And that's where like the big house comes in. So the thing about the Addams family, though, is that it did not debut on television. It has a different origin story. Do you know where the Addams family first appeared?
Was it in comics in the newspaper?
Yes, very close. Yeah. It debuted in the New Yorker.
Oh, great. Classy.
Yeah. But a while before, in 1938, was the first Addams Family cartoon.
Very interesting. Depression era.
Right? Depression era. But like a lot of things, it debuts and it has its own following, right? It becomes popular among certain groups of people. One of them is a woman by the name of Mila Nurmi. Okay. You might be familiar. Have you heard of Vampira?
Yes.
Does that name mean anything to you? Okay, so Mila Nurmi is the birth name of Vampira, or Vampira is the stage name, however you want to think about it. So she models her whole aesthetic after Morticia Addams, was a big fan of the Addams Family cartoons in the New Yorker. She's living in LA, trying to make a go of it, ends up becoming the very first late night female horror TV host.
Yes.
On Channel 7 in Hollywood. So she's creating, shaping her body, tight corset. So the Addams Family look is very Victorian, right? They live in a Victorian house.
Absolutely.
Morticia Addams is a Victorian woman, like dressing like a Victorian widow with the corset, etc. Right? Yeah. So Mila Nurmi takes this, huge fan, kind of updates it for this kitschy persona that she's portraying on local, access TV in Hollywood, but in turn, like makes the pitch and the suggestion for the Addams Family to network executives. And sadly, they don't give her any credit or remuneration for that. But, she's the one that essentially catapults the Addams Family from this sort of niche. I mean, it's the New Yorker, so how niche could it possibly be? But she's part of that path of the Addams Family going from the pages of the New Yorker to our television sets and to becoming this incredibly iconic counterculture goth family.
Yeah. And I mean, she brought it into the real world, right? It was from a comic.
Yes.
And she does look so much. I'm looking at pictures of her right now and she has like such an amazing like drag eyebrow, like a very arched evil villain eyebrow, thinking of like a Disney villain.
It's glorious. It's so glorious. And her
black
waist,
lipstick. The tight corset, like slinky black dress. And really long black fingernails that are very like today, right? It's like, very iconic.
Legend.
Obsessed. She's often photographed with what looks like a like complicated candelabra. Like it's like a lot of candles, a lot of fog in these photos. So yeah, she's really starting something. Yeah.
She would open, there's not a lot of footage available. I think back in the day when I was doing research for the episode, I saw a clip. And, she's running down a corridor of the studio with with all of the smoke. And she starts the show with this loud, blood-curdling scream. God, it's so good.
So good. Take me back to that era where we're creating camp. Like, it's so, what a dream.
Right?
William Castle. I know. I just want to be there.
Well, Okay. Well, yeah, I think that's an important point. I mean, there is something, I mean, camp, if I think about it, camp is counterculture in that it's just not taking the mainstream too seriously, right? It's like, it's helping turn that on its head.
Yeah.
Well, let's stick to the sartorial a bit longer because I want to talk about a little store. I don't know how old you are exactly, or like what your memories are of the mall.
The mall?
What was your relationship to the mall?
Oh my God. I still have a relationship to the mall because I go there because I'm like, you're dying and I have to like be with you while you die. And no, I was
the malls are in hospice and you have to be there. I got you.
I know. I have to be there. I have to doula them into the next life. But no, I love the mall. I loved the mall as a kid.
Okay.
It was like that third place you could go. I mean, you can say lots of bad things about the mall. It was made for weird suburban people to be away from the inner city. And then it was,
absolutely
consumerist palace. But I mean, it was that place you could go, and you could go to places like Spencer's and Hot Topic, which I definitely got some studded belts. You betcha. Oh, it was just a really great place to be free. And it was like you were allowed to be there alone. It's great. Loved it. Still do.
I agree with everything you just said.
Great.
Important point, and you brought it up yourself, was Hot Topic.
Hell yes.
So we're talking about like attire for the goth kids.
Mm-hmm. They get their own mall store. I wouldn't expect them to get their own mall store,
It's a beautiful thing.
They've really entered the mainstream now, and you can pretend you're counterculture, but
no, exactly. And what's funny is that Hot Topic was founded in Montclair, California. So it's a California company. And the first Hot Topic opened in 1989. So we're in the 80s. So if we think about where we're at in the 80s, last we left off, we're talking about goth music, right? These post-punk bands like Joy Division and The Cure and Susie and the Banshees and Bauhaus, etc. So you have a lot of young fans, teens with a little bit of spending money, and they want to buy their favorite band shirts and, merch. Where are they gonna buy it? Well, Hot Topic fills in that niche in the market, basically starting off selling band t-shirts for goth bands. But what's also interesting is that they didn't really plan on becoming a goth store in the way we think of them now, or the way they would evolve. The story behind that is they also, when they first opened, they specialized in accessories, so selling sunglasses, purses, that kind of stuff. But then they also experimented with selling some more alternative stuff or edgier stuff, right? So spiked wristbands and, as you meant, like spiky belts and things with dragon and skull designs and stuff like that. And then they noticed how popular that stuff was. It was selling incredibly well because there also just wasn't anyone else making it available, right?
Yeah, they filled in a really specific niche. And sometimes when you do that, everybody's going to come in that counterculture and you're going to be set up.
Well, because, at the time, where else you can't order things online.
If you wanted a band t-shirt, you had to go see the band.
And something that you mentioned, which is key to this, is suburbs. Malls are in the suburbs, and the suburbs come to play a very important role in the evolution of the goth and the gothic.
I'm not surprised by that.
Right? I think of it this way, right? So the suburbs are kind of like a castle, right? Like they're designed to keep you safe. But what if the call is coming from inside the house?
Yes.
Right?
Okay. Yes.
And who embodies that more in film in the 80s and 90s than a certain director whose name rhymes with Jim Lurton?
Tim Burton. Ding, ding, ding.
That's right.
Yep. Total goth king.
He's the goth king. I've watched a lot of his interviews. He doesn't do that many, but the ones that I have seen, he never describes his work as gothic, although many others do. And I think it checks all the gothic criteria boxes. Yeah. But I just think it's important to bring up Tim Burton in that, again, counterculture director, but becomes very, very important, does a very, very well at the box office with Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands in the late 80s, early 90s. And then per your original Johnny Depp mention at the top of the episode, Johnny Depp as our Edward Scissorhands comes to embody this Gothic aesthetic, this outsider protagonist, and then also introduces, you know, Winona Ryder's Lydia Dietz to us in Beetlejuice, right? Our very own, like, revamped Queen Victoria in the upstate New York suburbs. And also, like, she's an homage to the Wednesday Addams character. You wouldn't have a Lydia Dietz without Wednesday Addams.
Oh, absolutely.
And then we also have the Addams Family reboots, you know, in the 90s as well, starring Christina Ricci, who is our own generation's goth queen, both in the Addams Family films as Wednesday Addams. But then, you know, remember, she's also the emo goth daughter in the film Casper.
Oh, yeah.
Which, again, Gothic house.
Gothic house. Yeah. Got a little spiritualism in there.
The occult, right? So that's all happening in the 90s. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out about Gothic literature, and just to keep this in mind, is that, you know, Gothic fiction is the beginning of a lot of genres of fiction that we have today. So from the Gothic, we have science fiction through Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We get Edgar Allan Poe and the detective novel with Murders in the Rue Morgue. We get vampire, right? With, why am I blanking?
It's okay. You've got a lot of information.
I've got a lot of information. I think I've just run out. My brain's like, no more.
That's okay.
Wait, why am I like, it's like the vampire novel.
Dracula?
Thank you.
Okay.
Good Lord.
There you go.
What you have to think about with Gothic is that without it, we don't have a lot of things. Like most modern fiction that we have and that we think of and that we talk about, bandy about regularly, all stem from the Gothic, essentially. So we wouldn't have those things without the Castle of Otranto and this Gothic fiction movement, essentially, which is just important to keep in mind how many sort of branches of fiction we get from that.
Yeah.
In addition to the music and the clothing, etc.
Yes.
But so back to the 80s and 90s, I think, you know, when you mentioned Marilyn Manson, I think that's very accurate, right? We have this lineage we can go back to with the Gothic rock of the Doors and it being malevolent, satanic, electric, and on fire, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of been part of it for a while, right?
Yeah.
And so then when you get to the 90s, because we're in peak satanic panic, you can't get any more counterculture than making your goths witchier.
Yes, definitely.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's when we get the 1996 film The Craft.
Oh,
you know, our Lydia Dietz is now Fairuza Balk.
Yeah.
Who's, you know, wild-eyed and badass, womanly witchy, right?
Yes.
And then, as you said, we get the music of Antichrist superstar number one, piece of shit, Marilyn Manson.
That guy.
Yeah. So this brings us back to Satanic Panic. We have come full loop, full circle in how
Here we are.
This Gothic aesthetic and identity, made it from the barbarian people to this very day. And I think, again, what I want to leave people with and what has always left a big impression with me is that, like, Gothic doesn't mean dark, although it can, but it means counterculture. It means oppositional, like, to whatever's mainstream at the time. And that's really its utility. And it's something that we find very attractive and almost necessary.
Yeah.
And for me, the moral of this story is that the Goths, R.I.P., they lose to the Romans. They eventually, after 2 decades of horrible war and plague, they eventually lose. But it's a Pyrrhic victory. The Romans win, but not for very long. They end up kind of, long story short, more or less wiping themselves out. And then the Italian peninsula gets replaced or dominated by a new set of barbarians. Won't get into it. But, like, there's part of me that feels like the Goths one, right?
Yeah.
Like we have their name on our tongue to this very day, and it means something powerful in a way that Roman doesn't. We know what Romans are, but no one's like, dude, your dad's such a Roman. Or, you know, like it doesn't mean anything to us. It's not part of the lexicon in the same way. So I like to think the Goths won.
Oh, you're so right. The Goths did win. And man, I just gotta say, I respect the hell out of a Goth. I respect anyone that like lives in a costume, kind of like, it's like, I love anyone bold enough to make an artistic statement all the time or, pretty often and kind of assert some message through that. And, I think Goths, they mourn for all of the things of our world that are worth mourning over that don't have to be specifically death. And they think about death. They're good at terror management theory. They're like ready to face the darkness. And we really need that. And I think that they're better for it. And I just appreciate anyone brave enough to be a Goth. I wouldn't have been brave enough to be a Goth. It takes guts. So if you were a Goth, this one's for you. This one's for you. If you are a Goth currently.
If you, all Goths, past, present, and future.
Christine, what a fucking joy. This was, Chelsey. I just had no idea where this was going to go. And you're so much fun to talk to.
I loved your faith. I was
like, oh my God. Yes. Yeah, this was amazing. And why don't you tell us about where we can find your show?
My podcast is called T&J, a Roman Empire love story. So that's T&J, which stands for Theodora and Justinian. And it's a limited series narrative history podcast about 6th century Byzantium and the greatest recorded love story on earth. So you should check it out. It's wherever you get your podcasts.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Christine. And
thanks.
Yep. And thank you to all our Goths for your service. This was American Hysteria. Make sure you check out Christine's podcast, T&J. That's T&J, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can find a link in our episode notes. If you want to support our show and get ad-free episodes as well as bonus content, you can go to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. You'll get access to Hysteria Home Companion, the other podcast that I do with our producer Miranda, where we tell you stories related to the topics that we're covering or stories that we just know that you'll love. That's patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. If you go to AmericanHysteria.com, you can pick up some of our merch and you can leave us a message on the Urban Legends Hotline about a tale that you remember from growing up or even one you've heard recently, and we might do an entire investigation about it. You can follow us on Instagram at American Hysteria Podcast, and a really amazing way you can help us out is by leaving us a 5-star review on whatever app you're using. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius Smith, and I'm your host, Chelsey Weber Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope you have a great week.